2, and 3. What's up, guys? Dr. Kamei here. I am the DeFi dentist, and today I am going to be going over my 2025-26 bull market thesis. Now, this is very high level. This is not financial advice. I'm just going to be sharing how I'm thinking about things as I enter into this market cycle. If you don't know what any of this stuff is, DeFi, market cycles, whatever, you shouldn't be watching me anyway. Go talk to a financial advisor because that is not me. Okay, so I'm going to be walking you through a few different pieces of information that I've been juggling around in my head, but it's really starting to converge how this could all play out for this upcoming bull market. As you guys know, the stock market hit an all-time high recently, and so typically that's correlated with cryptocurrency or DeFi, and it tends to pull everything up. And so today I'm just going to be going through how I'm positioning myself mentally to kind of think through how to make some changes, some moves. I'm not going to be showing you guys my portfolio or anything like that. I'm just talking generally about what I think about as I enter into these kinds of situations, because if you are managing your own portfolio for your family, you got to have some sort of idea of what to do. Okay. So let's just start here. And this is a chart that kind of fell out of favor inside of the cryptocurrency industry. And they actually changed a bit of the, what's the word? They kind of changed a bit of how this particular chart operates. And so I did want to show you guys this just a little bit so you can see. But if you take a look at this chart here, what it'll show is the last 3 cycles of Bitcoin all the way back to its inception. And so what you begin to see over time is that right when it begins to plateau, that tends to be the sort of top signal area where you should be thinking about, exiting the system and locking your gains into maybe stable coins, or maybe just, if you're a long-term holder, you do nothing. But if you're going into this to try to maximize the potential that you could have in this particular market, you'd want to pay attention to this. And like I said, it kind of fell out of favor recently because it went out of lockstep. I think it was last cycle. Anyway, they changed some data. It's still very useful. Like, none of this stuff is ever going to tell you the future, but if you can intelligently look at patterns from the past, it can kind of help you inform your future thesis and how you're going to react. So if you take a look, usually price action starts to shift right around the period after the Bitcoin halving. So all these dashed lines here, back here in 2016, and then right here you had May 2020. I think my kids made a video about this one. Of the Bitcoin halving. And then we got one coming up here in about April-ish 2025. And so this is when, 2024. This is the year of the Bitcoin halving. So 2024, May is about when we're expecting the Bitcoin halving to occur. And it's not really a set time. It's a specific block height on the Bitcoin blockchain. And so once that hits, we start to see along the past cycles that it sort of ushers in this bull market. So same thing happened in 2020. It ushered in a bull market and we had a double top. And then the question is, where do we go from here? So if you were to just generally think, okay, if it kind of followed the same trend, you're looking mid to late 2025, things starting to peak out. Now, again, none of this is for sure, but you now have sort of a general time frame in which you got to start thinking about taking some profits, or at least exiting a portion of your portfolio, letting the rest ride, and just pushing that into the future. So the second thing I want you to kind of look at, ads. Let's see. I don't want to join for anything. How do I close this? Let me try to reload this. There we go. So the other thing that I think about is this chart right here. So what we have is something called the Bitcoin dominance chart. And so this chart in particular is really useful because it kind of gives you some cycle data on when Bitcoin tends to kind of hit its resistance in the market cycle. And then you start to see DeFi and they're called altcoins. And that particular market, all the other coins that aren't Bitcoin, start to rally and kind of have their day in the sun. And so according to this, we're kind of hitting a potential peak where a resistance could flood through Bitcoin. Bitcoin kind of had its Bitcoin ETF launched recently in January. And so now we're looking at this going, well, typically the market prices all of this stuff in. So we may be headed down soon in terms of Bitcoin market dominance. And again, that's all the collective cryptocurrencies together. What percentage of that is Bitcoin and what percentage of that is everything else? So we could see Bitcoin dominance go down, which simply means that people are more interested in DeFi. People are more interested in alternative investments like Ethereum, all these other coins that come along with it, and other layer one chains that exist out there. So just something to think about there. So politics. Now, I don't really have any political leanings here or there. I'm not really that interested from that point of view. I am really interested, though, in how this moves markets and how it tends to change the market confidence. And so let's talk about Trump for a minute. So he's clearly going to be the Republican nominee. I think Nikki Haley is only staying in just in case he goes to jail, which is an interesting play, but she just recently lost one of her big donors, Reid Hoffman. And so you kind of got to think, in all likelihood, Trump's going to be the presumptive nominee for the Republican Party. And regardless of his legal problems, which tend to boost his poll numbers, he may still make it. And if he does, this is sort of the mega bullish scenario. And I have other scenarios that I'm thinking about, but this is like the one that if something doesn't stop him, there will be a pretty bullish situation going on. And I'll explain that here in just a minute. But when you take a look at the polling and then you kind of take a look at how he's doing against, Joe Biden. I mean, the guy he's running it. So Joe Biden's approval rating pretty high. And what they've said is that it's never been this low. Well, any presidential candidate, a sitting president who had this low, below 40%, never made it to their second term. And so you can kind of see how things are not shaping up well for Joe Biden. So there's that piece of it. Now, when I think about how this is relevant, take a look at the Trump situation. So there's something called the presidential cycle theory. So I'll just kind of take you through that for a minute right here. So a lot of people kind of, typically the third year in a president's term is the best year. And that's because this is when they have a chance to start getting their budgets together, get their team together, implement the plans that they made. And so usually the pre-election year is the best. But as of late, this hasn't really played out. And so this is a tough one to bet on. But here's kind of where I see this being really interesting, because let's say Trump gets in. Well, suddenly he's back in office. People are already familiar with him. Some of his existing bills that have passed and like tax cuts, for example, they're still there. And so he's kind of going to pick up where he left off. So I almost think we're going to get a left translated situation where in his first and second year, one of those 2 years or both might collectively be the best years for his 4-year term. So what does this mean? Well, we're looking at 2025 when the next president actually gets installed. And this could actually be the time when we see the big stock market boom and you get a lot of positive sentiment. he unleashes oil, whatever his campaign promises are. Think about that. You may actually get a much faster election cycle if Trump is the nominee or Trump gets into the White House again. So that's, again, strengthening the whole 2025, 2026 thesis. When you take a look at the NASDAQ or the S&P 500 stock market, I mean, we're at all-time highs. Now, it's 2024, right? This is just going to be a year of volatility, in my opinion. I'm not too interested in doing too much. I'm just watching, I'm collecting information, data. I'm just paying attention to what's going on, essentially. And so when I look at this particular situation, kind of having this little pump to get investors excited again and seeing that their optimism is beginning to return. This is an important turning of events, because remember, we had a pandemic in 2019. It really depressed the market. Then we had world conflict. That really depressed the market. And then we had, record inflation, high interest rates. I mean, all these things are not like good to have a market really just rip. So we're hitting these all-time highs, but the question is why? Like, all I see is record layoffs and bank failures and mergers and acquisitions, which implies these companies are not doing too well. The startup world's not having a good time with VCs. They're having down rounds. The valuations are down. So what I think about is, the market's kind of counterintuitive in a way. Like, when it's bad, it's going to pump. And when all the news is good, it's going to dump. So what's going on right here is we're kind of hitting these all-time highs. There's some optimism. Who knows? Maybe Joe Biden and his team are trying to pump the market right before the election so they can swing some votes. But regardless, just keep in mind the old adage, sell in May and go away. That's something to look into here. But leading up to the Bitcoin halving in April and May of this year, this might be a sell the news event, right? And so just kind of think about that. It's kind of interesting how Satoshi Nakamoto tended to launch these Bitcoin halvings to time it with the 4-year cycle of presidential elections. So if you kind of think about that, Bitcoin and the stock market and presidential cycles, like these all kind of have somewhat of a correlation. All right, so here's another chart. I'm just going to reload this and see if I can get into it. Okay, good. So yeah, here we go. We got some all-time highs at the S&P. Why is the market going up? Well, as you guys know, the stock market's totally rigged, which is fine. You just got to understand how the market cycles work. Interesting note, DeFi is really one of the most exciting markets to get into because everyone says, oh, it's so volatile. Well, the reason why it's volatile is because whenever there's a 80 to 90% drop in the value of this market, there's no bailout system. Like, literally, you just have to survive through it. And so it's a real market. Like, real people trade in crypto. It's all on chain and there's no rescue program. So everyone likes to call it a scam, but okay. But like, if you want a free market, it's probably one of the freest. So just keep that in mind when the stock market's pumping, crypto is going to pump. And then as people gain more confidence in the market, they're likely going to try to push their capital into more risky assets like cryptocurrency, right? And like tech stocks. So there's lots of things to think about here as we go through this part of the cycle. And this is just another point to think about with the stock market and how this is all going to play out. Now, here's another part of the thesis that I was thinking about. The Ethereum ETF approval expected in May, Standard Charter predicts. So I think this is a sell the news event, honestly. Like, if Bitcoin took so long, right, to get approval for its ETF, it was delay after delay, like particularly with this SEC, like they do not want this stuff going through. Even after they approved it, they basically said, look, we don't promote Bitcoin. We still think it's a scam, but whatever, here you go, because their major donors like BlackRock wanted it. So I think the ETF noise around Ethereum is going to be a big deal, but I don't think we're getting anything till either later in the year or 2025. And that might actually be a signal that we're getting near the top of this particular cycle. So watch this closely. I don't think anything's happening with Ethereum this May, but we'll see what happens. If it does, then I'll add that to the thesis and kind of modify from there. So here's a really great chart that I always like to stare at because it's an old chart, but it's generally been true, right? Periods when to make money. And I think this was done way back in like 1927. And it just sort of like takes these big market cycles and it just plotted it on this graph here. But we're heading into this 2026 kind of period within this. And this could play out as well. So I look for something called convergence, right? You got all these different pieces of information. Like, are they kind of pointing somewhere? And this is another thing that I look at and go, this might actually time well with the bull market between 2023 and 2026. Now, obviously there's going to be, at some point, with the national debt and all these things going on, there's got to be a pullback. But we keep in mind, we've been in a bear market for a while, like a really long time. I think this has been a very extended bull market. So or a bear market, but when you get into a bull market, one of the big warnings I give is like, don't get too bearish in a bull market because you will miss out, right? And so I can always tell when we're in a bull market because when there's bad news, everything still goes up. So it's kind of something to pay attention to. So, again, you have to look at market sentiment. I typically look at crypto Twitter. Hop on there. You'll get lots of different perspectives, a lot of noise, a lot of lies. But if you start to see a trend or something interesting going on, you may actually want to, start subscribing to some good people. Again, I'm not here to give you all that detail, but it is very helpful to start thinking about that kind of stuff around this time, is following the right people and be careful of who you follow. That's pretty critical when it comes to crypto. So here's another thing that I think is starting to line up. So when you take a look at the inflation rate, so I kind of used to think that we were going to get, everyone's been talking about, I think they want 2%. Inflation is kind of their target, but we're still hovering around 3%. Just kind of look how it's staying steady there. I don't know if they're going to hit 2%. And waiting for it, I don't know. This could be it. This could be all we get. And they've certainly paused interest rate hikes for now. They got announcements coming up soon. There's more in March. There's more in May. But when that happens, there's likely to be a dip. So just keep that in mind. That might happen around May. I don't know. It could happen sooner. But the Federal Reserve and, they really got to think about all of this stuff, right? And Jerome Powell, he's very careful with his language, but just listen to sort of how he's talking, and it tends to give you a little bit of a signal on what might be coming next. So the next thing is like global conflicts, right? So you kind of want things to smooth out a little bit before you can kind of get your bull run. It doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means like it's distracting. It's distracting to the market because, we live in a globalized society and everything's connected. So for example, there's conflict in the Red Sea right now. This is right where that canal is, where like majority of the world's goods and oil gets shipped across this canal, and that could cause oil prices to spike. You just want to be aware that some of these things are relevant in the macro. So I made a little simplified way that I'm thinking about this, but these are the key macro events that I'm thinking about heading into this bull run. So number one, we needed to get over the pandemic. That's done. People are done with it. It's over, and they're overcorrecting. Like they wouldn't even respond if public health said there was a pandemic. So that's not going to be the thing. Hyperinflation, it's down to around 3%. It's staying steady. In all likelihood, in the near future, we're going to be getting a reverse interest rate reversal. So that means they're going to lower interest rates. And typically when that happens, you tend to get a stock market downturn. Okay. The next thing is world conflict. Now, the reason I made this yellow is because I don't think it's quite done yet. I just feel like the world just keeps getting into more and more conflict. It's kind of frustrating to watch, but from a market point of view, and when I'm thinking about how this all plays into things, you do want to have some sort of, I guess, peace in the world so that you can focus on business. Now, unfortunately, some countries, their business is war. So it's a great money-making opportunity for them. I won't get into that detail, but we do want to see some sort of a calming happen before we can start to really get, free ourselves from this weighing down effect that world conflict has, because it causes shortages in the supply chain. It creates all kinds of problems for businesses. People get very, I get very stressed and concerned, and the sentiment, people begin to save rather than spend. And so this needs to resolve to a little bit more, I think, before we can truly get like a unleashed bull market. The next is interest rate rises. So that's over. So that gets another check mark. So we're basically almost there as far as like having everything in place for the bull run. Obviously, there's some wild cards I see, like if Trump has legal issues, you might just get another Republican running. Joe Biden could just win. I don't know. Democrats seem to be pretty savvy when it comes to winning elections, so they might pull it off. The next wild card could be bank failures like 2008. Again, world conflict. If it just keeps heating up, getting worse, check out Wag the Dog. That's an interesting movie to think about when it comes to this. And then oil prices. So that's sort of my wrap up thesis for you guys. And again, that was very high level. Like there's a lot of detail here. I'm probably missing a bunch of things that I use that I haven't even talked about. But I just wanted to give you sort of a breakdown of what I'm thinking about heading into this bull run so that you guys can have more resources as you make decisions on how to navigate this space. So once again, Dr. Kamea, hope you enjoyed that episode. We'll be talking with you guys later. Hit me up in the comments or contact me if you have questions or if you just want to get into it or if you think there's something in DeFi that I need to look at. I'm all ears. I'm always paying attention. So you guys have a great night. Talk to you later.